Hey Matt, welcome to Cyberbytes, the podcast. It's brilliant to have you here today. How are you?
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. No, you're welcome. Whereabouts in the world are you based, Matt, for the audience?
I am, we'll say, about 45 minutes outside Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit, nice. Okay. Weather this time of year, how's it look? How's it holding up?
It's mostly gray. Sometimes we have some sun. It hasn't snowed very much yet, so that's good.
There you
We
go,
got
not snowed in. Probably similar to the UK, to be fair, in terms of weather. It's nice and wet and miserable at the moment and grey.
very much so. Yes, yeah. Everything's muddy, everything's dirty. It's good stuff.
This is it. This is it. Well, to kick off the pod, Matt, it'd be good to first of all rewind your journey.
Sure.
So, what I'm keen to share with the podcast is how it all started with you and how you got into the security space.
Mm. Yeah, it's a I think for a lot of people, let's say they grew up in the 90s using computers, and kind of grew out of that or into that, further into it, we'll say. My journey is kind of similar to that. I grew up just outside Detroit, Michigan, where Ford
Mhm.
Motor Company was headquartered.
Yeah.
We were very early adopters to the internet because Ford Motor Company wanted to wire the whole city where they were headquartered. So I had DSL internet in like 1993, very early, fast internet.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of kicked off all of my interest in IT and cybersecurity pretty broadly across my life. And to get kind of deeper into cybersecurity itself, like a lot of people, I grew up through doing help desks and doing IT, and when I was 18, 19, 20, and when I was 21, 22, I dropped out of school and I started my first company, Aegis Data Security, which was really more focused around encrypted file sharing before the days of Dropbox and all
Sure.
this. 2006-ish time, a little earlier than that actually. And my background has generally been, being interested in writing code, being interested in IT, being interested in cybersecurity, and I'm not someone who particularly likes to go to school. I like to do things and execute and try to do other new things. And Aegis was very much one of those like, hey, how can we try to solve a problem that we at least perceive as a security problem? And we
Mhm.
saw it in the 90s with PGP and key rings and all sorts of things. But it was definitely a foray into kind of how can we make bad decisions as people in our early 20s to build a product. If I could go back in time, I would love to be like, you are making some of the worst decisions here. But you can't know that when you're that age.
You live and you learn, right? These are the mistakes you make, and it's turned into who you are today, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's cool, and it sounds like you've come out of you've just like scrapped college sort of thing. You've come out and you started your own startup, which not many people are going to be doing, right? It sounds like it's like almost in your blood to be an entrepreneur. Like, talk us through that. Was it just natural? You're like, hey, I'm just going to start my own company, do this, or was there a push outside of
Yeah,
that from anyone?
the first one was, myself and one of my good friends from high school, realizing like, hey, we don't want to do this. We both hate school. We can build a program, or we can build a product that will really
Mm.
have success. So, I think for me, and for similar to other founders, it's kind of just this like inherent drive to just build stuff and try to do new things and try to solve problems is probably the best way to put it, or
Sure.
solve problems in a unique way. And when you're younger and founding, like the founders who are successful starting at like 20 and grow, like those people blow my mind. Like those are some crazy successful people. I think it's a lot of experiential, like, how do you do it? How does it go wrong? How do you make it better in the future? Blumira is my third startup, and second business to business startup, and it's definitely I'm happy to be where I am now, knowing everything I've seen go wrong in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah, for sure. And that leads us nicely to Blumira, right, where you are now. So you're the co-founder and CTO at
Yes,
Blumira. Are you
yes.
able to give the audience then an insight into Blumira, but also the space that you operate in, so around SIEM and XDR?
Sure, yeah. So Blumira really came from my background in working with managed services companies. After the Aegis startup, and then there was one in the middle called Family Signal, where it was essentially like Bayesian ML to detect when kids are being bullied, which is a whole other thing. Which that was like the 2011 cyberbullying was becoming a huge thing. And I learned at that point that don't go to a large company and try to sell them protecting children.
Right.
They will not take the risk to protect children. So for those of you who are wondering, they won't take it. So after those two companies, I exited those, and I started working with managed services companies really to kind of turn my, service building, project building into helping them build out their own internal services. Mostly focused around offensive security, so penetration testing, as well as defensive security. And that was really more of a, how can we take what is a really hard thing, especially think back to 2010, SOCs were still being run, Elasticsearch was starting to really kind of start to grow across that environment, 2011, 12, 14. And no one really knew how to grow it or scale it. It was just kind of a thing that we all did. And for those who were using commercial SIMs like QRadar, Alien Vault, it wasn't the most fun thing they've ever done. It was just a thing that they had to use. And in the MSP world, they did an amazing job, or they continue to do an amazing job of covering for the complexity of the IT industry and security industry, where, a lot of technologies are made for the SMB and mid-market. It's not made for people to just use. It's made for security people to operate. And the biggest need that I saw, and this would have been 2016, 2017, so WannaCry was kicking off. We were seeing all the ransomware really start to pick up after Equation Group got owned. It was a wild time for everyone, the 2016, 2017 time. Ukraine was also kind of getting deeper as well at that point. And we really didn't see, or I didn't see, a good path for what we were doing in the industry to really be successful. It was just kind of all of us throwing humans at the problem and hoping that we would get to a solution. And I think we can all look around us now and see that the solution didn't magically happen. Like, it's not like people stopped getting owned. If anything, it's worse now than it was 10 years ago, or at least it's more publicly worse than it was 10 years ago. And really, Blumira came from my ideation around how we can really solve the problem for SMB and mid-market. So when I say that, I mean, like, let's say under 5,000 employees, and you're the IT security team for that company. And in the beginning, Blumira was really more of an evolution of what SIEM was, into kind of a, let's make a SIEM that does everything for everyone, and it's much easier lift for them to implement. And for me, when I think about SIEM, there's a large industry argument around, like, what's a SIEM? What's a log aggregator? Like, what is the thing that's actually valuable to me? And that's, this industry is really good at getting caught on names. We're just really good at it. Like, we can always make up a new name and get caught on it. Like, we are the best at that. And I thought there was, or I believe there's an opportunity to really take what is considered a technology that no one wanted, SIEM, but it's just this hard thing that collects a lot of data and no one knows why, and really evolve it into something that's valuable to people. I think the value of data has changed a lot over the last 10 years. If you go back, people were looking at big data, they were looking at data aggregation. They're like, yeah, that would be nice to do, but we really don't have the staff or power to do it right now. And these days, I tell my engineers, and this is when we started the company, when we were designing this, we said the same thing, that it's our problem to scale the SIEM. It's our problem to deal with data. It's our problem to get insights from that data. It's the customer's problem to work those insights and solve their problems. So it is very much a kind of high-minded, how do we change the industry and really start to bring what is the IT, I will say the IT sec community from the SMB and mid-market up to where they can be really successful in their organizations without depending on an external source to kind of help them. Because in our experience, it doesn't necessarily help them. If anything, it kind of hurts their operations in their organization.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. And for those that don't know too much about the SIEM or XDR space, are you able to just give some more insight on essentially what that actually means?
Definitely, yes. So the SIEM XDR space is a kind of a beast that's evolved over the last 10, 20 plus years at this point. In SIEM, really all we're doing from the standpoint of the user, from IT, cybersecurity, whatever, is collecting data from your environment. Metadata from your cloud environments, cloud information from your Microsoft 365 environments, for example, firewall syslog data from your endpoints. And really the goal of it all is to be able to identify when there are patterns of risk. And, that sounds maybe straightforward, but it gets really complex really fast when you think about how data is different across every single one of those different platforms. How do you really bring enough humans that are really smart to solve where there's stuff happening in that data? And, let's say you're a company that spiked from, let's say you're usually sending just a small amount of data every day, and then something crazy happened. You send a ton of data. Do you want to be on something like a cloud platform and spend a lot of money because you happen to do that spike? Or are you on-prem and do you have the staff to fix that? So, SIEM has this kind of long and sordid history of being hard to manage, being hard to maintain, being hard to run. And all at the same time, it's kind of one of the most important parts of getting visibility into your environment. So it becomes a really important part of the stack that is a necessity, but over, kind of how it was implemented in we'll say the teens of the 2000s, it got a lot of like, this is bad, we don't want this. And which is really where XDR evolved from. In 2018, the CTO founder of Palo Alto started the XDR trend. And really what that came from was, another security industry making something up and saying, yep, here's a whole new thing. Look at this thing. We got a whole new thing. And, realistically, it was Palo Alto doing what is now the platform play, quote unquote, inside of the industry, which was, hey, we got a bunch of technology. We got firewalls. We got our own SIEM. We have all of this stuff. How do we then sell it as one package? And that's really where XDR came from of, we can evolve our ability to collect endpoint data into a platform. And when we do that, then they'll buy all of this stuff. And then we can really capture the enterprise market. But the moment that happened, it went even further away from the mid-market and SMB. And, if you are a 50-person company, you aren't going to buy a $250,000 a year license from Palo Alto. You're just not going to do that. There's no reason to do that. There's likely no value in it. And that's not to say XDR is a bad thing. It's just one of those areas that evolved in this direction of, well, we got to stop the attacker at the endpoint because that's where they get in. And then all the bad stuff happens. And if we can't stop them, then what are we going to do? But it does miss the fact that, SIEM was helping people meet compliance. SIEM gives you that visibility into what's happening inside of your environment outside of the endpoint. And while there is a need to have that endpoint view, realistically, it's a holistic problem across the environment.
Yeah, nice. And you've kind of very briefly touched on this, but I wanted to bring it up again around how Blumira and the idea came about. Was it just you and a couple of mates again chatting around the idea of something like this into space? How did that idea come to fruition?
It was in classic kind of like IT fashion. It was born exclusively out of stress and exhaustion. So we were running a MSP defense service. I had my own SOC. We were running our own SOC. We had, we were on call forever. We were working our incidents. That's what we did. And it was really exclusively me waking up one day and being like, I can't do this. Like, I cannot run a SOC anymore. Like, this is crazy. I know if I feel this way just as much as everyone else feels this way, because I am someone who obviously obsessively works constantly, as per the 3 startups. And it was one of those, there's a chance to kind of take this idea that we've started to implement in the MSP, because we had built out our own kind of technology stack, and say, we think we can make this really truly scalable using the lessons we learned at this kind of building out this service into something that's much more automated and supportive of those people, which is to say MSPs and SMBs and then mid-market organizations. So it is, it was born exclusively out of me being an operator in the environment, writing all the code to build out that SOC and that service with another engineer, and basically being like, this is crazy. Like we cannot do this. There's a way better way to do this. And if we can do it a better way, then everyone else will want that as well.
Yeah.
So, the high-minded, like, I have an idea and I think everyone will want that idea.
Cool though. Look where you are today, right? Yes. Yeah, it's an exciting journey that you've been on. And on that point as well, so can you give the audience a bit more of an indication of your approach to the market and potentially how you're doing things slightly differently from other folks and players within the space?
Sure, yeah. So at Blumira, and generally in my kind of career inside of IT and security, I'm always a strong believer that the organization knows themselves better than any sort of third party will. And as the industry has really, continued its growth pattern into external services and purchase services and letting someone else deal with security, and we'll have someone internally, it doesn't work. Like we can see it doesn't work. Like you can read the news and see that this, with the current pattern of cybersecurity and IT, is not working super great for everyone. And Blumira is really more of a focus on bringing that skill set back to the organization. And I think the industry, the IT and IT security as a whole, has done a really poor job focusing on what amounts to like 90% of employees in the IT and security market, people that are not working for very large companies, that are working for MSPs, that are just trying to get stuff done. And Blumira is really more focused around how to help those people get better every day, how to help them kind of grow from a risk reduction perspective and gain insights, and do it in a way that they don't have to do anything. So like everything in Blumira is automated from the standpoint of deploying out detection. We have our own detection engineering team. They do all the threat hunting for people. They get all the information out for people. And the only expectation that we put on people at Blumira, because I believe it is the expectation that should be on IT and security people, is to solve the problem that lands on their doorstep. Now that does mean that there needs to be less problems. And that's one of the other big problems in SIEM and security tools as a whole, where they just scream at you and you're like, oh, well, that thing yelled at me about 100 times. I'm giving up now, so I'm not doing that. Sure. And the moment that happens, and the moment you have your users kind of disconnect from your application and therefore not securing their organization, you really don't have a good path to success in that organization at that point. And it becomes a really important thing for organizations to really buy into getting better and just improving their organization and leveraging the alerts from a tool that is built to kind of make their lives easier to do so. So like at Blumira, because we measure this, because I'm glad we measure it, our users spend at most 15 minutes a day in the product. And that's exclusively because, we do a lot to make sure that the only things that people know about are things that they need to look at. Oh. And, that's a pretty, in a crazy way, a unique thing in the IT and security world for tooling, because, the expectation is, well, you get a SOC or you get a third party and they'll look at it. But they don't know your business. They don't know what you're doing. They don't know what your accounting people are doing. They have no idea. And you do. You know your organization. And Blumira is really kind of the hope and the focus of being kind of that point in moving the expectation of security and IT back into the organization by giving them tools that they can actually kind of leverage in their organization.
Love it. 15 minutes. That's nuts.
That's I love that stat. It's my favorite.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, well, it just shows that your platform is doing the right thing, right? Is if they need to be there, they should be there.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool. And so in terms of Blumira, I know we've discussed this. So Series B, right, at the moment, and you've had a decent year in terms of growth. You doubled the headcount, right, this year, roughly.
We are just coming up on, I think, 63 people now. So yeah, we're continuing to grow. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what does the future look like for Blumira? I don't know how much you can say, of course, but maybe you can share some insights.
Yeah. So a few kind of big things for us are really kind of continuing down what we just talked about, which is how do we make it easier to gain insights into your information? And at the same time, how do we make it so you can just make your life easier? Like that's kind of the name of the game. Give insights, make it easier, at least for me. And when I look at Blumira, so we have a new product coming out at the beginning of the year next year that essentially allows people to do, correlative and kind of, we'll say, object-based searching. So like if I was looking for you inside of my logs, all I would have to do is type in your name and I would get all associated stuff associated with you. You wouldn't have to search through logs. You wouldn't have to figure out where all the stuff is. You just get the information you're looking for.
Nice.
And that's really more focused around, most people don't want to have to learn a query language. Most people don't want to have to figure out how to get to data. I don't either on most days. I want to just find out what I need to find out. And to give you an example, if I get a failed login for, a domain administrator, I want to just go and look at the overall timeline of that administrator. I don't want to go have to look at logs specific with it. So it's really more about just making that speed to success and investigation much faster, which fits with just, making life easier, right? The other big ones are really more focused around making it easier for the product to get into the product. There are really not a lot of SIEM XDR products out there right now that are easy to onboard with no friction. Blumira, we consider, and generally speaking, 90% of the time is true. People can be fully onboarded in a day in Blumira, which is really fast for a SIEM. Yeah. We want to get that even faster, and we want to make it so you don't have to talk to a salesperson unless you really want to talk to a salesperson, which, in IT, I think we're all like 50-50, like, don't talk to me first. I will talk to you because I want a deal on this thing. And we want to make that easier for people. The other big thing that I'll mention for looking forward into next year and the following years are making sure that we have more robust automation. So right now we have like automated host isolation, automated IP blocking. We want to make sure there's more automated response as it pertains to like Microsoft 365, Google, making sure people can lock out users and reset passwords without having to go into another platform. And then, of course, looking out even further into 25, 26, coming over to where you are, getting into the UK, getting further into the other areas, making sure we meet GDPR requirements fully, all the fun stuff required with kind of data residency and making sure that everyone gets what they need. Because, if we've learned anything over the last couple of years here, everywhere in the world really needs this technology that's focused on their need and not kind of the broad enterprise that you happen to also get to deal with.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like some exciting feature upgrades, but also the move potentially to the UK or further afield, which is exciting as well. And you've probably answered some points within this question that I'm going to ask, but keen to hear your thoughts on the evolution of the SIEM and XDR space. Like, you've obviously talked around making people's lives easier, essentially, and that's probably going to just get quicker and quicker, right, and easier to manage. But how do you see the evolution of that space evolving over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to evolve in two different ways, and we're seeing it evolve right now in the direction of like have your own data lake. SentinelOne just released theirs. Microsoft, of course, heavy on this with Azure Sentinel. This concept, Panther does this as well, where you have this general concept of like, you have a bunch of data, we'll help you manage that data lake, and then you can glean insights if you want to, or however your team happens to go about it. And then you have the other side, which is really more where Blumira is going in, where we manage all of the data for you, we manage all the detections for you. All you really do is start sending data and stuff happens. And there's kind of a dichotomy that's happening in the industry right now, which is really more focused on where is the value to the organization. And if you are a large enough organization that has enough internal staff, maybe there's a reason to go in that direction of, well, I'm just going to have a bunch of data and I'll gain my own insights from it. But in my experience, unless you are a very, very large organization, you probably don't have the staff in place to operate it the way that you might want to for full visibility. And what often ends up happening is people start heavily adopting open source detections, which is not a bad thing. Sigma has great detections, for example, but they require a ton of tuning to work for your environment. So you get in this kind of situation where you're kind of putting resources into something that you thought was free, and you got this kind of like cascading effect that does happen. Then you have some other ones out there, of course, like Blumira, Arctic Wolf, that does more service-based ones, and some others similar to that, where you're starting to see that functionality get pulled further down market. That is, and realistically, security hasn't changed. Like the people who get attacked with 50 people get attacked the exact same way as the people with 5,000 people or 50,000 people. Like we see Iranian oil rig attacks just as often as I'm going to guess an enterprise does, because the attack models are much wider than they were, let's say 10 years ago, for example. So I believe there's really a need to kind of decouple the expectation of, I'm going to do detection engineering, I'm going to find bad stuff, and I'm going to respond to that. And I do think you're going to see the XDR SIEM industry move in those two ways of do it all yourself, good luck, big company, and we'll help you through this. But the will help you through this itself really needs to still ascertain, is it something that you should be doing as an organization, which I strongly believe, because I'm biased, that people should be, kind of working internally to solve their operational issues. Doesn't mean they shouldn't have support, but they should likely be the owners of that. And then you have the other direction, which is really primarily I'm going to give you my risk, you de-risk this for me. So I think you're going to see those kind of three different paths continue across the industry. My opinion, obviously, is that Blumira is going down the right path, but it's very biased. And I think everyone has their own, potential needs, but you really have to be in that like 15, 20, 30,000 person company where you have a really sizable team to get the value out of that technology.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Appreciate your comments. And to the question I'd like to finish with, Matt, is if you could give one piece of advice to a founder, maybe they're back when in your 20s, right? So now you know what you know. What piece of advice would you give someone that is potentially on the brink of setting up or wants to set up?
It's a good question. I think probably the biggest piece of advice I would give is know your customers and know your salespeople. You will be the first salesperson for the first 12 to 18 months. If you cannot, we'll say, knowledge transfer that information, you won't be able to be successful. It just won't happen. And it's really important to build what your person wants. Like what you want is not relevant. What I think is right is only so relevant. What really matters is, what does the market need? What is the market really going to demand from a usage perspective? And what does the product need to feel like to really drive them to success? Because realistically, I think that's the biggest problem in the security market, especially, is that we don't see people driving to value. So make sure that you're doing that, and you're really focused on how you would sell the thing. An idea is useless. An idea has no value. You have to be able to build it, and you have to be able to sell it. And that's probably the biggest thing. And the only other thing that I'd say is the stress does go away. I do not live in stress at this point in my life. Like I don't, because you can't live that way forever. It's not possible. Like it's just not. You just burn out, and then you'll want to hate your life. It just doesn't work. So, focus on getting to stability and don't give up your life for it. Like I had a kid in the middle of all of this. It's possible. It just takes work, and it takes planning, and it takes time. You will be very, very tired.
Can imagine. Well, yeah, you're a living proof of that, Matt. So, kudos to you. And if someone wants to get in contact with yourself or Blumira, what's the best way that the audience can do that?
Just pop over to Blumira.com if you're looking for Blumira. If you're looking for me, you can find me on LinkedIn or literally anywhere. I'm always around. Great stuff. Well, Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Great. Thanks for coming on. Is there anything you wanted to mention before we wrap up? No, just for anyone who's listening to this, who has a need for defensive security, Blumira is free forever if you just want to set up a few cloud integrations. So please, by all means, go get yourself secured, and only pay me money if you think it's valuable for you. Love it. There you go. Can't say fairer than that. Yeah. Matt, awesome. Well, yeah, pleasure, my friend. So chat to you soon. Yes, thank you very much. Take it easy.